Good evening. Well, we're delighted to be here this evening for a very special event in the life of this university, and to have the opportunity to review some of the activities of one of our great citizens in the city and the state, and to present that individual with the seal of this university, which our 87 presentation, which is an expression of the affection and feeling which this university has for Paul's great work in behalf of all of us. Delighted to welcome Liza and Sascha, that they're with us today. And we have a few individuals who want to say a few words. And let me just start by asking our Attorney General, Bob Abrams, to say a few words. We know Bob. We know he was re-elected last year with a wonderful majority from every nook and cranny, and all the counties did beautifully. We know of the great work he did in the Assembly and his great leadership in the Bronx when he led that borough. And we know about all the things that he's committed to: consumer protection, equal rights, the environment, all of the important issues, the really important issues that occasionally don't have that ring the bell, depending upon what the national and other environs are. But those are the issues that are the long and the ones with staying power. And it's really a pleasure to have a good friend of Paul's, who is a leader in all of the areas that I mentioned, participating with us this afternoon. Bob?
Thank you very much, Jim. Feels like it's the gathering of the clan. The good people of New York are here. And you know it's a special occasion when Jack Newfield wears a tie and when he trots out a brand new blazer. Paul is especially honored at that sign and signal. This was a very hectic day for me. I started this morning in Washington being the lead-off witness before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee, indicating my opposition to Judge Bork. It was an antitrust panel, and I had served as the chair of the Antitrust Committee of the National Association of Attorneys General for 3 years. And then I had to make sure I came back in time because the Democratic Party was meeting today. And they were adopting, after a year-and-a-half struggle, some very significant party reforms and ethical rules that are of a landmark nature. And that's really not unrelated to my being here with you at this particular function, because these are the things that have driven the life of Paul DuBrul. Issues of constitutional challenge and consequence to men and women across this country, across the state, across this country, civil rights, civil liberties, issues of great consequence that would be decided by the highest court in the land, issues of party reform and political reform, integrity in the governmental process. All of these things come to mind when you think about Paul DuBrul, what he stands for, what drives him, what motivates him, what his life has been all about. I've been one of the privileged people in New York for a variety of reasons. One of them is because Paul DuBrul was willing to serve me, to work for me. I was able to pick his brain and to use his talent and to be able to have the forum of the borough presidency be a platform and a vehicle for some of the real imaginative things that came out of the brain and mind and soul and conscience of Paul DuBrul. Paul has contributed so much to the life of this city. on very gut and basic issues that affect people's lives: housing, mass transportation, governmental decision-making, structure and reform of the governmental process. And of course, he has done it in a variety of ways, working for significant public officials who, like Bill Ryan, could implement what Jack Newfield and Paul DuBrul were doing with respect to lead poisoning, and making sure that gets translated into the laws of the country, into the policies that are going to no longer allow children to lead a life of mental destruction because they were eating paint that was from the walls of their homes that was laden with lead. Paul was able to do many things, working with key elected officials, writing brilliantly with pieces that appeared in publications like The Voice, contributing with Jack to a major work, The Abuse of Power, that highlighted the kinds of scandals, I think, that came to light in the last year and a half, the kinds of legal graft and problems that Paul and Jack had pointed to were done years before. Law enforcement authorities were able to put together evidence that I think has caused so much embarrassment within our own city. Let me just finally say that I think it's appropriate that this ceremony be held in this building, in this institution, because it's really tied to the life of Paul DuBrul. This is a great college, part of a great university. It gave a working-class son like Paul DuBrul the chance to broaden his horizons, expand his potential. The doors of an institution of higher education were open to him, and all of us profited because we were able to have somebody really develop and then go on to help affect change and policy direction that involved the lives of millions of people. I guess it's a sign of some of my new responsibilities that I have to make a confession that it's the first time I've been in the new building. Traveling around the state in places like Chemung County and Chautauqua and Cattaraugus, I guess, prevents me from being on the 8th floor or the 5th floor of the new Hunter building. But it did my heart good because I was on the Board of Estimate attending those midnight sessions with the prodding of Paul DuBrul to make sure that after the fiscal crisis, we were going to be able to complete the construction of the city university plan and program that included the completion of the buildings that were contemplated and designed for Hunter College. And a guy like Paul DuBrul helped encourage people like me and so many others to make sure that we were doing the right things and maximizing our time in important elective office. So I'm honored, I'm flattered that I've been asked to be present with all of you, and we share some small measure of thoughts of appreciation for the life and role of Paul DuBrul in the life of this special community, the city of New York. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Bob. You should see the library in the other building. That's a great facility also. Would like to indicate that the City Council President, former Borough President Andrew Stein is here, and we thank Donna Shalala, who'll be leaving us to go out to the far places. President of Hunter College, who's kindly enabled us to be here today, and Ed Sullivan, Assemblyman Ed Sullivan, who is Chairman of the Higher Education Committee, are with us for this, and we're delighted to see them here.
He's also my Assemblyman, he better be here.
Ruth Messenger is really quite a unique person, kind of a conscience for this city. While we get distracted with so many things that happen, living from crisis to crisis, or living from inadvertent opportunity to inadvertent opportunity, Ruth keeps us on a path that keeps us focusing on the issues that are of real importance, critical importance. With respect to this university, we've been privileged to work with her to try to enhance daycare support for so many of our students who are a single parent or who are on welfare, and also to try to make sure that not only do we have daycare support, but that we have the appropriate social assistance as well. It's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Councilperson Ruth W. Messenger.
Thank you, Jim. I want to thank Hunter, the City University of New York, and the Messrs. Murphy for hosting this extraordinary event, honoring a true son of the system and recognizing in Paul DuBrul a person who gives back every day what he believes that life demands of all of us. I want to celebrate Paul for his life work as a writer, muckraker, urban analyst, health policy advocate, organizer, planner, political advisor, change agent, and father. From his childhood, from his City University experience, from his time as a union organizer, from his personal battle to sustain his own health, Paul has focused his attention on those in our society who escape too many people's notice. He has saved lives through his muckraking and through his organizing. The lives of those who might have died from eating lead paint, the lives of those discarded by the welfare system, the lives of those without decent health care in one of the richest countries in the world. He deserves this award. I first met Paul 11 years ago. In our third meeting, he consumed 8 beers, convinced me to run for the city council, pledged his support, and made it clear we were in this struggle together. And we have been. Paul and I speak every day, often several times a day. We celebrate victories, curse defeats, and share jokes, children's achievements, and health notes. Paul is idea man, wordsmith, advisor, and mentor. Even more, although we come from different churches, and it's been a long time since Paul has seen the inside of his, he is my moral compass. He helps sharpen my sense of compassion, shape my political vision, and maintain my ethical barometer. Paul understands better than almost anybody I know the capacity of the system to chew up and discard its workers and its recipients, and he remains vigilant against such inequity. He seeks to stop all assaults on the powerless and get the system to do more for people than to them. But Paul wants more. His vision of government is that it should be of and by those now left out of the system. And he conveys to me and to others his fierce sense that while change may not come in our lifetimes, it is our obligation to continue the struggle and hasten the day. Now, to be honest, Paul is a tough taskmaster. He often sees first what is wrong, and he never hesitates to say so. He sets high standards and makes uncompromising judgments. But Paul does more than just analyze and critique. He shapes the vision, draws the roadmap, and provides constant advice and encouragement. And his life is the ultimate standard. He is the one who aims the highest and tries the hardest to do it all, to make it work, to realize his goals. That piece of Paul that is shaped by his illness is beyond the direct understanding of most of us. There are many for whom just staying alive in Paul's situation would be more than enough work. The energy it requires the edge of fear and rage it engenders could consume most of the people in this room. They only sharpen Paul's resolve to work harder and to make change sooner. Paul leaves the cheery tone, the notion of the golden mean, the turn the other cheek behavior to the rest of us should we care to indulge. His way is direct, blunt, and gruff. He is often impatient and sometimes angry, but he is still tremendously caring, appreciative of all help and support, always willing to share the problems of others and strengthen their resolve. Paul gives what he demands and sets a life example for all of us in the process. He is a study in patience, impatience, love, hate, humor, gloom. He lives the limits of passion and compassion, acknowledges terror and strives to move beyond it, keeps himself and all of us moving toward a more perfect vision. Paul DuBrul is an extraordinary person, an unusual father, and a very special friend. To me, he is a life example of what friendship means. I am proud to have this opportunity to thank him publicly for all he has done and continues to do to make a difference in my personal and political life, and to tell him what he already knows, which is that I could not do it without him.
Thank you, Ruth. I have a letter that just came to me within the hour. Dear Jim, I regret that I am unable to be with you on this joyous occasion, honoring Paul DuBrul as the 1987 recipient of the seal of the City University of New York. I would like all assembled at Hunter College tonight to know that the university's selection is extraordinary. Paul's devotion to the people of our great state is known to all of us. He is often inclined, however, to share his wisdom and energy quietly behind the scene, but this is one occasion where he will not get his way. Paul's work has helped improve the quality of our lives, and his campaign for social justice remains a source of great inspiration. I want you, Jim, Chancellor Joe Murphy, Attorney General Bob Abrams, Jack Newfield, and all my friends to know how pleased I am to join you in congratulating Paul on the prestigious recognition extended to him this evening. Best wishes, Mario. We'll now hear from the faculty. It's my pleasure to ask Michael Harrington, who's raised our consciousness not only in New York but all over the country, indeed the world, as to the realities of poverty in this country. And he keeps at it, keeps pricking our consciences and raising our consciousness. He's one of the stars of our system. He's one Irishman who, on the journey through intellectual matters, went from center perhaps to the left, as opposed to our great leader in Washington, who went in the opposite direction. He's a delightful, provoking, and important person for all of us, and a dear friend of Paul's. We're so happy he's with us. Michael?
The great political scandal in 1987 is when it turns out that Reagan is not really Irish. You know, we were once the most hated people in New York. Now we've produced William F. Buckley Jr. What else? As I said a couple of years ago when New York Democratic Socialists of America honored Paul, when I first encountered Paul, as far as I could tell, he was seriously considering a lifelong career as a juvenile delinquent. And he came into the radical movement in that spirit. That is to say, he didn't join the radical movement because he read a book. He read books. But he didn't join it out of analytic reasons simply. Paul had and has a radical personality. He is irreverent. He's funny. He is a disestablishmentarian. He says things about revered and honored friends of mine which he shouldn't say. And I think that quality that has informed Paul's radicalism. And by the way, I want to tell you, it is radicalism, if I can speak among friends. That quality has been extremely important to all of us, to this city, and to this country. Related to that, I think that Paul brought that radical spirit, that the juvenile delinquent monkey aspect of his personality to his work. That is to say, one of the things about Paul's work with Jack, with the analyses of poverty, with the political advice, etc., is that it's always been street smart. That it's always been precise and concrete. And one of the great sins of American radicalism has been a great genius at developing soaring universals and not a terrible amount of success in applying them to the real world of daily life. And I think what Paul has meant to both the radical movement and the rather larger non-radical movement in America is he has brought that spirit of the universals and made them so concrete and so specific and so understandable to somebody on the street. Since I'm here as a faculty member, I've got to say something in faculty-ese. So I would explain what I have just said by arguing that Paul DuBrul is the greatest example I know of Aufgehobenheit. This, all Hegelians here will understand, means that when you change, you don't leave behind what you were. You transmute it and you change it into something else. And I've never seen an outpaper quite as good as Paul DuBrul. Finally, I don't know when we discovered the word for CUNY, mission. I suspect that when Paul was here at Hunter, that Hunter didn't know it had a mission at that time. But I want to tell you something. The idea of a mission is real. And Paul DuBrul is an example of what that means. Because I will tell you, the city of New York and the people of this country, in terms of what this college did for Paul, in terms of that educational investment, we are living off of that investment to this very day. We will live off of that investment all of our lives. I think it is enormously appropriate that Paul DuBrul receive the seal of the City University of New York because he is perhaps the finest incarnation of its mission I know.
Thank you, Michael. The collaborator, the great collaborator with Paul, Jack Newfield, is here. They started working together, putting out the arrow, firing it occasionally or aiming it more often than not. They did a very important work on power in New York, reissued it. It's a kind of a permanent reference piece for all of us who really would like to figure out where the buttons are and who pushes them and who the successors to that process may be one day. And he's a great writer in his own right, has written about Kennedy. He's a great editor of The Voice, a great investigative reporter. He promises to do a Pulitzer-type piece on this evening's activities to be published at a later point. But we're delighted to have Jack Newfield with us.
Paul and I became friends 30 years ago in the building across the street. He had come to Hunter College from Elmhurst, Queens, and a Catholic high school. I had come from Bed-Stuy and Boys High. We were both only children who resented authority and wanted to be writers. Paul and I worked together on the student newspaper, the Hunter Arrow. Paul was the editor, and I was the sports editor. Paul got to be editor in a staff election in which I was his campaign manager. People sometimes think that Mario Cuomo is the only candidate I've ever backed for anything who ever won. But Paul DuBrul was my first winner. Paul converted the Hunter Arrow into a socially conscious, crusading newspaper. Paul covered the early civil rights movement in the South and the Youth March for Integrated Schools in 1958. He made Martin Luther King and A. Philip Randolph more famous than Hunter than the leaders of our student government. And this wasn't easy, because the head of our student government was Norman Abrams. It was also during this period that Paul invited me to hear a young Democratic Socialist orator named Mike Harrington. The next week, I told Paul I didn't want to be sports editor anymore. I wanted to write about serious things. Paul was my teacher at Hunter, although I have a vague recollection of something I taught him. Paul was fresh out of LaSalle High School when the movie Baby Doll came out, and Cardinal Spellman declared it would be a sin for any Catholic to see that movie because it was so dirty. So I took Paul to see it. And he didn't think it was erotic enough. Paul remained my teacher long after we graduated from Hunter. In 1969, he taught me about the ghetto epidemic of lead poisoning, helping me write a series of articles while he was working as a housing organizer for the University Settlement House on the Lower East Side. My articles caused a stir, but it is Paul, with generations of infants and toddlers in the South Bronx and Harlem, should honor. He saved lives by organizing a coalition that forced the Lindsay administration to test and treat slum kids for lead poisoning. It was Paul who first instructed me about the folly of Westway in 1973. It was Paul who kept me straight about the rights of labor ever since he worked as a union organizer in the South. It was Paul who educated me about the city's fiscal crisis as we collaborated on our book. I must confess that when we started, I couldn't tell the difference between a debenture and a debutante. But the lessons I cherish most from Paul have been those he has taught me about life, about personal conduct under pressure, about the standards by which we judge ourselves. Paul has been my role model for those values I have come to hold most dear: courage, persistence, loyalty, will, generosity, intellectual integrity, and independence from fashion. I've seen many people articulate those values, but I don't know anybody who has kept faith with them by exemplary action the way Paul has. He has displayed these values most dramatically in his defiance of cystic fibrosis. Paul was diagnosed with the disease when he was about 9 years old. When we were at Hunter, he mentioned it to me late one night when I asked him why he was gulping some pills. He was vague and casual about it. But then I read up on the disease and learned that almost nobody lived to be 21. Paul was then 18. Paul's disease has come to rule his time, but not his life. He is in pain much of the time, and he is a captive of medication schedules. But he's defeated the pain to write and think and be a magnificent father to Sascha. Paul's character has conquered his fate. There's one anecdote I want to share about Paul because I think it sums up his uncompromising spirit. In June of 1977, we published our book on New York's permanent government. Shortly after it came out, publicist Howard Rubenstein kindly went out and purchased 30 copies for his 30 clients we had exposed. Howard invited us to his office and asked us to inscribe the 30 copies to his 30 condemned clients. I bowed to conformity and Rubinstein's civilized hospitality. I wrote polite, bland inscriptions to municipal monsters like Roy Cohn, Stanley Friedman, and Harry Helmsley. But then I looked over at the stack of books Paul was autographing. He had written wonderful threats and insults in every one of them. To a landlord, he wrote, quote, "Best wishes to a greedy parasite." To a real estate lawyer, he wrote, quote, "To John, who has murdered whole neighborhoods." And to an ex-communist union official, Paul wrote something about being a social climber and a traitor to the working class. Paul wouldn't give the bastards an inch. And that's why I love Paul as the brother I never had.
Thank you, Jack. When I went to LaSalle, Hedy Lamar's Ecstasy was the talk of the day. It wasn't erotic, we were erotic, but anyway. It's my pleasure to introduce the Borough President of Manhattan. I think in terms of this university and the words that Michael and Ruth uttered, Dave Dinkins' singular achievement is the leadership that he gave to the institution of the Sikh and college discovery programs, which were the first aspects of our democratizing this university and providing access that's meaningful to all of the citizens and people of this city. He has a very special relationship to Paul and Liza that he may want to mention in his remarks. It's our pleasure to welcome and to say hello to Dave.
Thank you very much. I'm so pleased and privileged to be part of this distinguished assemblage to place tribute to one who certainly deserves it. I wish I could have been here to hear all of the wonderful remarks that I know were made earlier. I did hear most of Jack. But I do have a proclamation I want to present. You know, we get to do this from time to time. I watched Percy Sutton and Andy Stein deliver proclamations, and it does make a difference. Sometimes we really have our hearts in it, and we mean it from the depths of our soul, and this is such an occasion. It really is, and I feel very proud just to be included. This reads, Office of the President of the Borough of Manhattan, City of New York Proclamation. Whereas Paul Anthony DuBrul ranks among our nation's premier journalists, activists, and advisors, a public servant who has dedicated his life to the struggle for a more equitable distribution of power among all people. And whereas a man of tremendous compassion and conviction, Paul DuBrul founded the Citizens Committee to End Lead Poisoning, an organization which effectively saved the lives of thousands of New York City children exposed to toxic fumes. And whereas while a student at Hunter College, Paul DuBrul was at the forefront of efforts to support the early civil rights movement in the South, organizing the first youth movement, Youth March for Integration, and later serving as a union official in the effort to organize the Right to Work South. And whereas a versatile and insightful strategist and organizer, Paul DuBrul has served as a key advisor to dozens of public officials, community organizations, and writers. And whereas Paul DuBrul authored with Jack Newfield, The Permanent Government, a brilliant analysis and expose of political oligarchy of New York. And whereas we're gathered here today on the occasion of his receipt of the prestigious seal of the City University of New York, to express our respect and gratitude to a man who has inspired us all with his courage and commitment. Now, therefore, I, David N. Dinkins, President of the Borough of Manhattan, in honor of his lifetime of service to the people of this city and nation, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, September 30th, 1987, in the borough of Manhattan as Paul Anthony DuBrul Day. No kidding. That's great. David. I'll put it here if I may. Should have put it in. Why don't you?
I just told Dave that I understood that he married Paul and Liza. He's done so many weddings.
I do want to say that we did very good work so that we'll be married forever.
I see President Roscoe Brown of Bronx Community College. I see Mark Green. Hi, Mark. It's my pleasure now to introduce the Chancellor of the City University, Joe Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must say I'm enormously impressed with anybody who could get this kind of a collection of lefties in one room at the same time. But I want to be clear about the fact that I had breakfast with the mayor this morning, so that I'm not political. Especially. Paul DuBrul caused some problems on November 7th, 1957. with President George Schuster of Hunter College. The Arrow reported that day that a committee bars the Arrow reporter from the council's budget meeting. The committee was discussing the disposition of $4,305.74 deposited in a reserve fund in 1943 and later discovered in 1956.
With them.
Student council president seeking to ban Paul is quoted as saying the reporter's presence would inhibit the free flow of discussion. There then goes on a very long article exposing everything that occurred inside that closed meeting, written by Paul DuBrul. The mystery, of course, is how someone who was barred from this meeting then managed to report everything that transpired in there. Paul, you said something that was extraordinarily meaningful to me personally, and I believe to all those who have a commitment to advancing the cause of social justice at a time when one wonders how many allies we've got. There are many to the right and few to the left, and sometimes the cause seems hopeless. Sometimes the rhetoric of the establishment overwhelms us. Sometimes it just takes a sentence or two to make what we are all engaged in more possible. You said on Thursday, May 21st, 1959, you can never be satisfied because there is always so much more that could have been done. But you tried. And in this empty, half-apologetic little phrase lies all the satisfaction that people who do things for others will ever have. End quote. Thank you for that. It's my pleasure now to read this document, which is a presentation of the seal of the City University of New York to Paul Anthony DuBrul. Paul, I'm going to stand next to you while I read this. This document reads, as an activist, a writer, and an advisor to government leaders, you have championed the cause of the powerless and fought for more equitable distribution of power. Your book, The Abuse of Power, written in 1974 with Jack Newfield and reissued in 1977 as The Permanent Government, has become a standard text on urban government. From your student days at Hunter College, class of 1961, you have been consistent in your pursuit of equality for all. You have worked on the first Youth March for Integration You founded and served as president of the Citizens Committee to End Lead Poisoning, which was the catalyst for both federal and New York City legislation. From your work in the early planning for the War on Poverty to your current work as Special Assistant to the New York State Commissioner of Social Services, you've been dedicated to the improvement of the lives of all the people of this society, particularly the disadvantaged. The family of the City University of New York, its trustees, presidents, faculty, students, and staff, extends its deepest appreciation to Paul Anthony DuBrul and is pleased to honor the exceptional contributions you've made to the welfare of the citizens of this city, state, and nation. Thank you.
To this city that I love so much. Mario Cuomo and Cesar Perales have made it possible for me to continue contributing. And it's very important. It's important for my health. It's important for a guy like me. It's important for my self-respect that I be able to contribute. And they bent whatever red tape was necessary to make sure that even though I can't punch a clock in an office, I still get the support I need to be able to use the acquired background and intelligence and maybe just information over the years that can be of service to the people. I'd like to thank Bob Abrams. Everybody's saying today how angry I am. Well, that's true. That's true. I'm a difficult guy, and I don't get along well with telephones. And I want things done yesterday. But the thing that doesn't come through is that Bobby and I had a hell of a lot of fun up there in the Bronx, making everybody nervous and running around with our crazy, gimmicky press conferences, our 6-foot subway token, and a lot of other things we put together to dramatize the problems of this city, as well as crawling around in subway tunnels at 3 o'clock in the morning and uncovering dangerous situations, and it was great. It was great. Those were good days. And I think that that's what public service should mean, that there should be that excitement there. I weep in a sense for the people who come to steal rather than serve, because ultimately they will be caught. And they missed the point. The point is that public service is good, and it's satisfying, and it's meaningful. And sometimes it even pays a living wage. I can't say enough about Ruth or to Ruth. Smartest thing I ever did was twist her arm to run for city council. Wild tigers couldn't keep Abrams from running for office. But Ruth was really reluctant. She'd been beaten by a hair in a local race. She was raising 3 kids. She had to send them to college. And she had to think about the future. And another race, the year after she lost, was a tough go. And I still say that she has become the conscience of New York, the one-woman opposition movement. And we'd be in far more serious trouble than we are already if she wasn't there. And don't any of you ever doubt it. She doesn't get enough help. She doesn't get enough support. She doesn't get the coverage she deserves from the papers. But she goes and does the job every day. A good soldier, fighting in those trenches. And it's an extraordinary job that she does. Let me tell you something about politicians. I see Andy Stein and Bob Abrams are here in the same room, which is not too frequent an occurrence. They have something that they share. And it's I think, a very significant quality. They're both guys who aren't afraid to hire people who will give them a hard time, who may know more about certain things than the people that they're working for, who may be difficult in many ways. But they know that only if you hire people who can't be bought can you get the kind of consistency that you need in people serving the public. And I think they both deserve a lot of credit for making that concession. Most people in politics are too vain, too empty to understand that, to understand something. Somebody mentioned Bill Ryan. Now there was a significant human being who understood it all. I remember standing, freezing's a better word, in a doorway on Broadway, talking with Bill Ryan about lead poisoning, and not knowing that he was going to be dead so soon. And we were plotting together. And I think that is really the best of it. When the public official is as committed as you are to making the social change, then you know you're dealing with a very special person. When you've got to go and beg for justice, you know you're in trouble. Finally, it's probably fitting that I say something about politics. And you couldn't stop me if you wanted to. I have to say one thing to Michael. Yes, I came into the movement to change the world. And that's what I've intended to do the whole time. I had a friend, much older than I, named Vaughn O'Brien. And he joined the movement in the 30s. And after the war was over, he sat back one day. The guy was married, had a couple of kids. And he said, "You guys aren't serious about overthrowing the government." And they said, "Well, you know, conditions and this and that." He says, "Look, I got a family to feed. I'll see you around." And that was it. He left the movement, never went back, never went to another meeting, because he was serious. And I think you have to come with that kind of a commitment. Not necessarily to overthrowing the government, but to changing the world, to overthrowing what's wrong with the world, and to overthrowing certainly some governments. And I can give you a very long list. If you're going to get anything done. I can't understand people, and so many of them from my generation, who were, used to be called parlor pinks, I guess. I don't know what you call them now. People whose politics are in books. I read as much and more, probably, than almost anybody else in this room. Those of you who've seen my little sanctum up there, those places piled high with books. Because books inform our actions. Reading the book isn't the action. And too many people make that mistake. I mourn for my generation, in a sense. Because except for the corporals guard of us who survived and carried on and fought on, so many of them have retreated, fallen by the wayside, and use as their excuse that they have responsibilities, that they have hostages to fortune, and if they had to retire or recede from the struggle for change so as to raise the money for the kids and all the rest of it. Let me tell you something. Next to going to Hunter College, the most radical thing that ever happened to me was becoming a father and realizing how far we had to go and understanding the kind of world I wanted for my son, Sascha, and how that world wasn't going to be there unless I actively did something to help create that world. That's what, at a very crucial moment in my life, as a matter of fact, helped to regenerate me and keep me doing the hard things, making the hard choices. And I think that all of us, and there are many people here I know who do have families, should look again at what our real obligations to those kids are. They may not be sending them to Harvard. They may be saving them from nuclear annihilation. I cast my first vote in November 1960. And if anyone at that point had told me that I would live 2/3 of my adult life under Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and Rockefeller, I would have suggested that they be committed to our then still functioning mental hospitals. We have lived through a terrible period, that if I was writing the history books would be called the Great Regression. And I think only now are we beginning to emerge from that. I don't know if I'll see the full flowering, but most of you will. And I hope that you will take up again the causes and the struggles that most of us have shared over the years with a renewed vigor. Because I sincerely believe that the time to dream has come again. And we're the kind of people who can make those dreams realities. Thank you all for sharing this with me and my family. And letting me feel your love. I'm someone who basically has lived my life in the shadows. Making snowballs, convincing other people to throw them. Tonight, for a little bit, I've had a chance to feel what it's like to throw some snowballs on my own. Thank you.